talk about the eighth continent. So we all know about the seven continents, but recently, about 15-20 years back, a new continent started floating above us, something like the UFO of Independence Day movie. It's a huge thing where things download, you download things from, then you upload things into, and you have a sense of space somewhere. People have a sense of space, but you can't really place it. It's there somewhere which is happening, but you don't know where it is. So this has been a new thing which has started happening, and I started asking this question: is space finally fragmented? Fragmented as this, like this installation, a lot of architects can relate to. We take a volume of space and then we further carve it out inside, and then you modulate it, and then you create further rooms. She has expressed it very well in this particular art installation. But this is not really the fragmentation I am talking about. I am talking about fragmentation which is going even more. So I am talking about you starting in your house, then you get into a car, you're in another space, and then you disappear into another space of your email or an SMS or a phone, or then you go into Twitter or you go into a Facebook page, and then you are actually scattered all over the place. So this kind of space which is there, which people are talking about, is kind of coming into our lives in a very diffuse manner. We are all trying to struggle with the visualization of it. Where is it all hanging in together? And today we see scenes like this. So here is a nice architect designing a beautiful environment, and then the environment is populated by people there. And what do those people do? That every now and then they go into a rabbit hole, into their devices. And initially it was irritating, but now we kind of take it for granted that yeah, this happens. Like, what can you do? Like, you take your mobile and then you go into a Twitter feed or a Facebook page or a email or somewhere else, and then it's now kind of part of the norm. Actually, we need to pause here. Being architects, we have actually seen these kind of things happening in space itself. There's a huge plot of land, nothing there, but we as an architect, we have designed things over there, and things starts happening inside it, and they go around doing things meaningfully over there. So in one sense, it's the same thing which is happening here, excepting this time it's not architected so far, at least. It's all dispersed in various different locations. So now I need to kind of put this in perspective here. So I speak to computer guys, and they start talking about big data and text patterns to be extracted and things like that. And I start thinking that, you know what, have you ever figured out how much data is there in a building? You're talking about the biggest possible hard disk you can ever get. You get into a building, you have memories there, you have, everybody has got little things to remember over there. I'm not just talking about BIM issues like building information modeling issues, which some architects are familiar with, but I'm talking about once you create a building, it acts as an absorber, and then it's going around depositing things into it. So what are these computer guys talking about? Do they even know the amount of data which happens in a building? This is a place where we deposit our own personal memories. People are making love, there are children being born, there's whole life and emotions happening there, and you are talking about big data in computers. So let us put that in perspective. The perspective is like this, that you just take 15,000, I'm not even taking 100,000 years of human evolution. Just take 15,000 years of human building up of knowledge, and then put it onto the face of a 1 hour of a clock. And you find that it's only in the last 5 minutes that people started thinking that knowledge is something which happens when you examine the printed word in the beginning, and then later on words and text and numbers inside computers. If you really look at it, use of all this knowledge and data on computers is just the last 5 seconds or so. and using the internet is the last 5 microseconds in this 15,000 years. So the question here is that what on earth did the human beings do all these years? Were we some really dumb people like who did not know anything about knowledge, and only when the computer guys came, suddenly like we were talking about big data analysis and pattern recognition, things like that? Of course not. What we were doing was something like this. We were actually arranging things meaningfully in spaces. We are arranging meaningfully in spaces here. There's a reserve tag on some of these tables here. There are symbols over there. A person themselves becomes a symbol. You notice things over there, and therefore you build up a meaning. And how come this is not used? Now, we know that all the information which we are dealing with is all interconnected. You click on a link, it goes into a blog page or some website, and then you click there and then you go to a Twitter feed or something like that, or you comment on Facebook, and then you know that somewhere like these on that 8th continent all these things are all happening, but exactly where? And if you really look at the way we are all struggling with our meanings, is like language is a precursor of things to come. So the amount of things which is usurped from architecture and brought into computers, like the word architecture itself, they say software architecture. And then you talk about website. Architects say site, that's where you go to. You talk about site under construction. You talk about cyberspace. So there's a struggle to know where is this all happening. So it ends up being a mesh of things, all right, but it's quite a lot of times it's a mess. So my question here, the central point which I want you to all think about is, what are architects going to do about this? I'm talking about real architecture, I'm not talking about software development or anything like that. But let me take a bow and stretch the arrow of reason with certain reasonable amount of tension in it, and stretch the bowstring back so that it really hits what you really want to do in whatever we are all wanting to do meaningful lives. So there is one aspect of business which has got relevance here, and that aspect is, we all know this, but we don't verbalize it too well. Architecture deals with probably one of the most rarest raw material. Somebody has got a parcel of space. That space can never be created. Nobody creates space. It's not possible to create space. Somebody influences the hold over that space, and it's given over to architects. Architects manipulate it, work on it. Not just architects, there's several people, chain of events, they architect it, they sit down and work on it, and you need to express your design inside it in a very, very, very trepidatious manner. You have to be sensitive to the fact that, you know what, if I have to recycle that raw material, it'll probably take decades to recycle it. I can't just be one huge giant who can just knock it down and then rebuild that particular architecture. It's not going to happen. So when one of the bowstring stretching which I did, and I was very fortunate to do that, is to ask myself, how do I express architecture? How do I express architecture before it gets constructed there, before my great-grandchildren will get affected by that? We are very, very fragile as a business. In our profession, the business of architecture is very fragile. And it's nobody's fault. All of us are sincere. All of us are talented. All of us are able to deliver on art. All of us are very sensitive about how we have to handle climate. All of us are. Just that the sequence of steps which we have to take as we go towards putting it together, and that parcel of space which actually gets built, you are going to lock it for sometimes centuries there. And in that process, when my work was used in IIT Bombay for energy calculation, they found one of the things which was really remarkable is that 55%, they claim that 55% of the energy crisis issue is just because of architecture. Not bad architecture, just architecture. Again. So I dread this situation. We design beautiful buildings, and my great grandchildren may be doing this somewhere down the line, and I am not able to be there around. Now, how do I influence this? What do I do in the process? What do we as a community do together to do something really meaningful for the sake of architecture? We simply increase the diamonds in the rough. We need to increase the number of raw material which we have. Why? Because a lot of very nice architects come out of college, start practice, and the whole system starts dictating 55% of energy issues we are stuck with. When we increase the amount of raw material, what I mean is that we now have got that 8th continent into which we can actually design. I'm not saying that you design apps. No way. Software development is a very, very, very primitive thing. It's just a flash in the pan kind of thing. It's not what people make out to be. Okay. It's that we really sit down and work with architecture. I was designing Konkan Railway's headquarter building, and halfway down the design, I realized they don't need a building. They just don't need a building. So I told the chief engineer, Limay, that you don't need a building. He was staring at me. He said, you know what? Don't you realize that you're getting fees for this? I said, I realize, but actually you don't need a building. And it turned out into a software, not written by me, by them. I told them, you're going to write a software for this, and this is one railway didn't have a building. It doesn't have a building for their headquarters. I was actually designing it in Ratnagiri, got stopped halfway, never got constructed, and that whole organization now works inside there. Now this is quite common actually. There are many offices which is actually having employees working in a dispersed manner. So in one sense, if architects come and start designing even in the internet space, I'm not talking about this kind of situation where you have one more app and one more this thing. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about actual designing of flow plans. Give a nice design in which people can inhabit. How? Those kids you saw which with that gadgets, they actually have a sense of presence and place inside that particular flow plans over there. When they have that sense of presence and place, a large part of what we do in the real world actually would now happen in the virtual world also. Today that's not happening. Today you have to stitch up the memories of where you were. You have to look at your email and then you have to remember where that email was. You know, the amount of clutter which is there in my brain, I sometimes wonder why my pillow is so dirty. Then I realize that when I turn over in my sleep, all the passwords and search terms starts falling off from my ears. And they go into it. And this is crazy way of looking at life when architecture was the way we were actually handling knowledge all this while. Now, there is a wonderful opportunity here which actually has got knock-on effects for the real world architecture. Like the way I said that I told the Konkan Railway guys that you don't need an office building. You can probably say that, you know what, I'm going to destroy this parcel of space here. And that parcel of space could have been occupied by some beautiful greenery and whatnot. Why not say no to that particular project? Because you can actually then be responsible enough to give a really meaningful, worthy design for somebody to work with in their actual internet space, which is, you know, today what we think is not tangible, 10 years, 20 years down the line, it will actually, not 20 years, maybe one generation down the line, it will be a tangible thing. So I'm going to meet you there in that space. It's already in some way happening, you know. So I'll catch you on WhatsApp. But it's not yet there, and it's all full of lot of errors and lots of this thing, but there's that sense of presence is not there. My point is that if we make actual designs there, and we actually populate it with the people over there, the avatars of people. Somebody was telling me when I demoed some of this work which I have done, I have now extended my brain to do these kind of things. So it's actually building information modeling itself, but now that building information modeling has gone up and is now being used to really architect the internet world. And it's not to do with software design, it is actually talking about generating flow plans and doing meaningful things with those flow plans. So imagine that you now have some additional clients which you have who's coming with you with these spaces, and you can really give a reasonable response to people and situations and systems which is dictating and arm twisting you to do things which you really should not be doing. So that's what I'm saying. If you have more of the raw material, we can actually say, okay, no, in some situations. It's not really about software. It is not at all about software. It's about the new situation and the opportunities which these kind of knowledge spaces are giving us. And this can have very beautiful end effects. If we don't get in there, you will be still suffering some tiny little cute little app. You say, wow, what a nice thing. And then you have one more app on your on your device and something else on your device. And I'm saying, hang on, your architects are trained designers. Okay, why are we not doing anything there? We are talking about software guys who have really spent only some 20-30 years. We are talking about architecture, probably one of the oldest subjects in this world. We could not survive as a species if we didn't have architecture. And if we will not survive as a species, and the equivalent of climate crisis is surely going to happen in the internet spaces. And it's already happening, all kinds of hacking and stalking and people looking at last scene of somebody else's WhatsApp status. It's already happening. The ladies here probably already know this. So why are we not doing anything about it? Why are we? It's an opportunity which is there, and it's a beautiful opportunity to improve the real world situation of design. We figure out ways by which rooms are arranged, how rooms are interconnected, how people will gather in there. We can actually visualize how all this happens. So that now should happen even on the internet. You do that, we can actually safely tell enough clients no, and enough architects say no, then those clients will say, okay, let me also start becoming a little bit more sensitive about my demands on this very raw material which is very, very precious. And you could probably of influence to a lot of forces which do that. So that's the context. So we need to architect spaces, we need to generate responsible designs. Thank you so much.